All right, so this is our last in the series of Our Dinosaurs Might Be Wrong. And this is another favorite of mine, so people often ask, what's your favorite dinosaur? If you've been paying attention to this video, I named like at least two, if not three dinosaurs. I'm like, this is one of my favorite. Honestly, it's hard for me to choose. Um, so when I was little, like we used to have this dinosaur book that belonged to my uncle from like the 60s called I think it's the Big Golden Book of Dinosaurs, and there was a picture in there of an allosaurus attacking a brontosaurus, and like it was scratching it and making the brontosaurus bleed and stuff. And I was like, when I was like 4, like I just thought that allosaurus was like the scariest like animal in the world. Like I was like scared and like fascinated by it at the same time. So I've always had a special place in my heart for Allosaurus. You also heard me say, I don't know, maybe I didn't quite say it, but I know I went through a stage when I was a kid because of Jurassic Park where I thought raptors, particularly Deinonychus, was like the best dinosaur ever, and I was like obsessed with it. And I told anybody that had ears that the dinosaurs that we call raptors should really be called Deinonychus, and it lived in North America, and the Velociraptor lived in Mongolia, and blah, 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 blah. So I always have a special place in my heart for that one. And there's another dinosaur I have a special place in my heart for as well, and that is dinosaur. You probably might like it too. I've heard kids specifically say this is a favorite, and that's Spinosaurus. Because one of the first dinosaur toys I ever had as a kid was a Spinosaurus. And one of our Stegosaurus just fell. That's okay, we'll pick them up later. I don't know how well you can see these guys, but it looked basically like, kind of like this orange and yellow one. It was actually orange and yellow, but it was like a lot bigger. It was like that big. But I want to say the head was more like, it was pretty similar to this. And you'll see this one too. So these are kind of similar. They're both standing upright in that kangaroo posture, which is wrong. The other big thing, especially this one, is the head is totally wrong. And if you've seen any modern pictures of a Spinosaurus, you probably know that already. So why do the toys look like this? Maybe you've seen an old Spinosaur toy or picture and wondered the same thing. And that's because up until really recently, Spinosaurus was not a very well-known dinosaur. And I think that's first of all, Spinosaurus, part of the reason I like it a lot, and I think other people do too, is because it's just pretty cool. But I can't say why it's cool until going into the history of it. The other thing is the history of it is pretty interesting. In case you can't tell from all my ramblings on these videos, I like the animals themselves, but I think the history of how they discover these animals and how our ideas have changed just is really interesting. And it shows there's so much work still to do on dinosaurs and prehistoric animals in general. There's just so many discoveries to be made out there, and I think that's cool. All it takes is like one bone, and you can totally change your mind about any of these creatures. And that's kind of what happened with Spinosaurus. So, a long time ago, in the like 1910s or so, a German paleontologist found a bunch of bones in Egypt. And he brought them back to Germany, and it had like these spines that had the big sail on its back, so he called it Spinosaurus. Now he, I think, had the jaw, the lower part of the skull, but nothing else of the head. And he had the sail, and I don't know, like a few other bones, and that was it. So he didn't have nothing close to a complete skeleton. But he did some sketches of the bones he had, and he drew this, reconstructed the skeleton, like drew a picture of what he would think it looked like if it was complete. And he basically drew it as basically an Allosaur or T-Rex with a sail on its back, because he had no idea, he didn't know a lot about it, and those were the only two meat eaters like known at the time. At least Allosaurus would have been known when he discovered this, but anyway, and that's all we knew of the animal for a while. And then, unfortunately, World War II broke out, and the original bones that were dug up of Spinosaurus and part of the museum itself that was kept in, I think it was in Munich, Germany, were destroyed. So the only fossils we had of this animal were destroyed, and they didn't find any other Spinosaurus bones for like decades later. So that's all we knew were sketches that the original scientists had of this animal. Now, eventually, they found another type of dinosaur called Baryonyx in England. And then they found another dinosaur very similar to Baryonyx called Suchomimus in Niger, in kind of like northern Africa. And I think as they compared these dinosaurs to what was kind of known of Spinosaurus from the old sketches, that these animals are all kind of similar to each other, and they started to suspect that Spinosaurus was related to Suchomimus and Baryonyx. And they did have enough of Suchomimus and Baryonyx to know that it did not have like a T-Rex or Allosaurus shaped head. It had this like long, thin, kind of crocodile-looking head, or at least those two dinosaurs did. So then they started to think Spinosaurus did too. And then when you started to see pictures of it looking more like a bigger version of like Suchomimus or Baryonyx, because they also could kind of tell, or at least from the original description that the original German paleontologist made, that this was a really large dinosaur. Well, then later, and I want to say it was around 2014, 2013, another scientist, I think he's actually from, I don't know if he's from Michigan, but I think he teaches in Dearborn, or I don't know, his name I can't remember. I think the last name is Abraham. I'm not, this poor man, I'm not doing him any credit, was in Morocco, and he found, it's a long story how he found this, I'm not going to go into it, but he basically found more Spinosaurus fossils, and he got a bigger picture of this animal, and they began to realize that Spinosaurus was way different than any other dinosaur known, even compared to Baryonyx. Like, it had really short back legs, really long front legs, really long front claws, and a really long body. And this scientist decided, he thought that this, he was also working with another famous paleontologist named Paul Sereno, whose name I do remember, who works out of the University of Chicago, so also out of the Midwest, so I think that's cool, that this was a very aquatic or semi-aquatic dinosaur. Semi-aquatic means that you're like a crocodile or a hippo. You spend most of your time in the water, but you're not fully aquatic like, I don't know, a dolphin. And they picture this living Spinosaurus living like a crocodile, swimming a lot in the water, catching a lot of fish. Now, some scientists then argued and were like, no, wasn't built for that, couldn't swim, reasons. They did a bunch of equations and they're like, no, math, science stuff, and they're like, no, this animal didn't swim well. Well, then it got really interesting because they didn't have a tail as Spinosaurus, and when they discovered the tail, which was only like last year, it was this big flat crocodile-like tail. Here's a picture of Spinosaurus, by the way, and seeing that tail then made the other, Sereno and I'm sorry, I'm so embarrassed, I can't remember the name of the other guy, realized, yeah, this animal was totally a swimmer. Now, then the other two scientists were like, no, we're not convinced yet because of science reasons, and you'll have to read about it. As one guy on YouTube said, like, probably Spinosaurus is the only animal besides Tyrannosaurus that gets, like, argued about the most. And you will realize that these scientists really do argue a lot. Their little arguments are actually funny sometimes. So they're kind of fun to read about. On that note, I briefly mentioned the bone wars of the 1800s. You should look that up too. I think we actually have a book about it here at the library. And that's pretty interesting to read about. So on that note, Spinosaurus, totally these dinosaurs are wrong.